truly is. Brown drives, scoop layup off the glass.
That's not the first time we've seen a superstar in premium white sacrifice the body.
Scoring net, knocked away. Ball game.
Welcome into another episode of First to the Floor. Ben Vallis here. Thank you for joining us. Hope you're doing well. Joining me for a bit of a nothing podcast, really. Let's be honest, given where we're at this point in the offseason. Not a lot going on. It's Mr. Wayne Spoony. Spoons, how you doing, sir?
Good, Ben. Every time we talk, it's a nothing podcast. It feels
True.
like, right? You know?
Absolutely.
Why are
But
you people
particularly
listening to
now.
us? Yeah.
I mean, we do have something going on in a couple of nights' time. So Thursday night, the great John Corrales, the pod father, at least as it pertains to the Celtics world, is joining us for episode 3, I think it is, of our Get to Know the Celtics Media off-season series. So looking forward to that and hearing a little bit more from the inside world of his, podcasting game and how he sort of came up as a Celtics media personality. So looking very much forward to that. In the meantime, maybe scraping the bottom of the barrel here, but we've got some potential free agent acquisition stuff to get to. And before we get into that, Spoonie's going to preface all of that with a bit of a cap situation rundown as far as the Celtics are concerned.
Yeah, so this is assuming that we will continue to keep Justin Champagnie on the books for about $2 million because he's fully non-guaranteed. So we could, as Ro shouts out my cat Cookie in the chat, so we could non-guarantee him and carve out a little more space if we wanted to. But right now we've got about like $3.5 million underneath that second apron. And if you'll remember, that second apron is if you exceed that, then you have all these terrible things that happen to you. But also, I think more importantly is that we can't use the full MLE right now because that is $5 million and it hard caps you at the second apron. So we could only use 3.3 million of it. So basically, I don't anticipate us using the full MLE. So we're really looking at minimum contracts and probably don't want to exceed that second apron, but we also got that nice TPE from the Grant Williams trade. So if we do want to go over it just a little bit, we can use that TPE to absorb a contract and add a rotation or a low end rotation guy if we want to. So that's where we're at.
Yeah, and what's the impetus for avoiding that second apron for the Celtics at this perspective, given some of those punitive measures don't really come into effect a year from now?
Yeah, well, it just jumps the tax bill really, essentially exponentially once you cross over that line. So you got to ask yourself, is adding an end of the bench guy who's slightly better than a minimum contract worth an extra $7-8 million in tax? To me, I don't care. Go for it. Yeah, right. But to Wick Grossbeck and Steve Pagliuca, and I just butchered his name, but we're moving on. I think they would probably care. So I don't. And then once you're above it, it's difficult to get below it, right? Because guys are going to get raises next year. Jaylen's Supermax will kick in, assuming he signs it. Yeah, right. We're assuming at this point. And so I see, I just don't see a lot of appetite for the C's to exceed it this year because they're almost certainly going to be above it for the next couple seasons. And they are going to be paying some very, very large tax bills.
That said, let's get into a few very spicy potential free agent signings, starting with someone who is not a free agent, and that is Kenrich Williams, aka Kenny Hustle. And shout out to Squim Jim on Reddit for bringing this to a lot of people's attention, in that he does fit very, very closely, very well, very snugly, if you will, into the Celtics' $6.2 million TPE. He's with the OKC Thunder at the moment, like I said, so he is under contract. He's a 28-year-old, 6'6" wing. He is a solid player, 37 point. I completely butchered that. 37% from three. He's part of that OKC roster crunch, though. They've got, I think, 21 players signed currently, so they'd be looking to move on from some of those guys, and given his fittingness into our TPE, it could be a potential pickup for the Celtics, especially given that he does kind of fill a position of need, sort of that wing power forward archetype. Not a bad 3-point shooter, like I mentioned. Can switch defensively. The OKC Thunder, they had a positive net rating with him on the court, which I think is a pretty glaring indicator that he's at least not a defensive negative. The downside, and this is going back to what you said a second ago, Spoonie, he would sort of bump out a tax bill up significantly just by way of acquiring that salary. And OKC apparently want a first-round pick for him, and apparently they've been standing pat on that stance for a while now. So do you think that this is a pick up the phone and give OKC a call situation, Spoonie?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm really high on Kenrich Williams. He really is pretty similar to Grant Williams defensively in that he's sort of an undersized big almost, but you're right. He's very switchable, and offensively, what I really like about him and basically anybody who played on OKC last year is that you had to make quick decisions. Like if you remember our games against them, like they would make you defend for every 24-second shot clock, every time down the court, catch it, drive or pass. Catch it, drive and kick, catch it, shoot. There's absolutely nowhere in their system for people who hold the ball sticks to them. And that's really what kind of undermined Grant Williams' season last year was he wasn't doing those types of things. Sometimes he would kind of hijack the offense because he wouldn't take a shot. Or vice versa. He would try to drive into traffic. And I think Williams kind of knows his role a little bit better than Grant, which makes sense. He's much older. Grant's got a lot more room to grow. He will probably end up a better player than Kenrich Williams. But right now, I think Kenny Hustle's probably slightly better than Grant. And he earned that nickname. Like the dude is an absolute maniac. And we are missing maniacs right now, right? We've let our primary maniac, we've let our serial axe murderer go in Marcus. We need dudes to fill his shoes, man. And Kenny Hustle absolutely would. So he is, I think, the type of player that I could maybe see us crossing that second apron for, just because he would be such a nice fit in that sort of 4 spot or 5 if you want to go really small, which OKC did quite a bit with him too.
Yeah, all that mania has gone out the door. You're absolutely right. And one of the better nicknames in the league currently. Sure. Do you think if the asking price is a first-round pick, do you think that's what maybe stops the Celtics going for this one?
So there's a lot of talk now that since those late first-round picks have a certain salary that they, those the rookie scale salaries for each first-round pick, there's no room to negotiate. And actually, there is room to negotiate more money. And basically teams always do it. They just always give these guys more money than what they, what the baseline for the rookie scale is. It's a very small, it's not a lot, but, right. And so folks have said like high seconds are actually going to be better because it's the same caliber of player and they're cheaper, especially with this new second round pick exception, which allows you to sign them for 3 years. You get their bird rights. So it's really kind of flipped the script a little bit and given you more, you have more control over your second round picks and they're at a lower value. And like the difference between 36 and 29, as far as the player, is probably nothing. It's essentially negligible. So I would consider throwing a first at. We have so many seconds. Yeah. Some of them are going to be good. Like who cares? Like throw a first, whatever, unless you're lining up. Like we have the next superstar we think's going to, want out and we want to target them with a bunch of firsts and a lot of these seconds. Like that doesn't seem like the plan to me now that we have Porzingis. So like, why not, man? You can add a rotation guy that can be part of the rotation for years to come, who is cheap and knows his role and plays defense and hits the glass. Like I would consider it.
Yeah, and if the window is now-ish, which it is, you've got to consider like what's going to help us more, a future first or Kenrich Williams. And I think we all know the answer. Obviously, a physical player who can actually give you court time and minutes is going to be more helpful for a championship run. So I think a lot of people would balk at that, like seeing that a first-round pick was included in a potential trade for Kenrich Williams. But like ultimately, in the short term, that's going to be a better move for the Celtics. Free agency-wise, Spoonie, who have you got for us?
Okay, so actually these next two guys are not free agents. They're also they're on 3 million or less, right? So we can take them in with the TPE and we won't cross the second apron.
Great.
They're not good, right? So this is like we are looking at like you have too many players. You don't have room for this guy. Maybe we flip you one of our seconds or something like that, and we'll just take this guy. You carve out a TPE yourself. First guy is Amir Coffey with the Los Angeles Clippers. Oh, look at that, Ben. You even got graphics. That's beautiful.
Oh, yeah. That's why I was late.
A massive 3.4. Yeah, work caught up to me, man. I'm going to be a few minutes late. I see. I gotcha. He's 26-year-old, 6'7" wing. The Clippers, they have so many wings. Like, there's no room for this guy to play. They're trying to get rid of good wings. Never mind Amir Coffey. He shot it really well 3 years ago and 2 years ago, and then was absolutely terrible last year. And basically all he really brings offensively is shooting. So if he's not shooting, he's not a particularly good defensive player. So you're just kind of betting like, hey, his shooting is going to come back. He can shoot the ball. He's got decent size. Like, he's not going to be a complete disaster on the defensive end. And he comes extremely cheap at a position of need. A little help on the wing doesn't hurt.
Yeah.
I mean, he's not very exciting, frankly, but this is where we're at this point, right? Like, our team is basically set. We've got 14 guys on the roster. We're looking at the 15th man.
Yeah, it's officially the doldrums of the offseason where we're sort of semi-frothing over Amir Coffey and some other names to come. And yeah, maybe we should have prefaced this segment with we're talking about the free agency period, not necessarily free agents. Like, who can we acquire at this juncture in the offseason? And Amir Coffey, I mean, really, we're talking about guys who can be that 15th man at the end of the bench. And there's still so many names, like Peyton Pritchard, for example, who are going to get significant court time before the guys that we're talking about now. But we do need to fill out the roster. We do need to account for injuries that occur throughout the regular season. And Amir Coffey is someone who can come in and give your bench players spot minutes while they're filling in for injured starters, for example. So that's kind of the archetype that we're looking at. Amir Coffey, I remember him having some potency with the Clippers. Again, like you said, multiple years ago, not recently. He's not a name that we've seen all that recently, but that's what makes him acquirable from the Celtics perspective at this point, I guess. What other names have you got for us, Spoonie?
So this guy would actually take us over the second apron just barely, less than $1 million, I think, or maybe just right on $1 million. But he's young, 22-year-old big, 6'9", big wing, center type on Denver, Zeke Naji. And he's kind of struggled a little bit. He's been banged up here and there. He's been in and out of the rotation. He shot the ball absolutely terribly last year, 26% from three. But the 2 years before that, he was over 40% on small samples. So you got to think okay, if this, I feel like we need another center that's different than Luke Cornett, just because okay, we know what Cornett can do. But it wouldn't hurt to have sort of a prospect type center on the bench that is inevitably going to get some minutes because, Porzingis isn't going to play every game. Horford's not going to play every game. Rob Williams isn't going to play every game. So he's athletic. He's got decent ball skills. You know what I mean? He's not stone hands looking to get rid of the ball as soon as he possibly can every time he touches it. And he's all right defensively, not really a rim protector type, but kind of a keep his guy in front of him, contest shots, don't get absolutely destroyed while he's out there. So he's 22. He's shown some legitimate high upside flashes to the point where, unlike Coffey, I think we'd have to probably give up some actual assets. I'd be interested in what your buddy Dice thinks of him, Ben, since he is a Nuggets fan. So Dice, if you're in the chat, let us know. But I think that you've got such a solid 8-9 veteran type guys. Brad has really seemed to be targeting these younger free agents, like Brissett, 25, Banton, 24. Obviously Jordan Walsh is going to be up with the big club. He's 19. So Brad seems to be doing kind of filling in, hopefully one of these guys pops and becomes a real rotation player. And then we're really set. We're 10, 11 deep and, we're ready to roll. So Naji would be that type of signing, that type of trade.
Totally. Championship experience as well.
Yeah.
22.
Exactly. Got a ring.
I like the idea of a 6'9" anyone in the NBA. As you know, I'm a big dimensions guy, and 6'9" is right on the money there as far as the ideal dimensions for an NBA player. Incredible insight. We better pull up a comment from our buddy Z Gamer as well, who says that Gorgie Deng just got his rights renounced by the Spurs. Not a prospect, obviously, but I wouldn't mind him if Griffin retires, who is another name that I just now can't believe that I haven't put on the list of free agents that we should be looking to acquire. Blake Griffin, Gorgie Deng, Do either of those names jump off the page to you?
So I'm an insane person. I've always liked Georgie Dang. Like, I don't know, like he could kind of shoot it a little bit.
Yeah.
He's must just be, I haven't watched him enough to really have a true evaluation of his defense, but he must just be that bad defensively because every time he plays decent minutes, like he scores, like, and he can rebound. He's huge. So he's not going to be a complete liability on the glass. So, or maybe he's got like attitude problems because I think he's 31 at this point, and like he showed some flashes in Minnesota and it looked like he was really carving out a role there. Then I think he went to Atlanta and basically his career's been over since then. He's just bounced around as a deep bench guy who can't find minutes anywhere, but he's got some skills, man. I don't know. I think the problem with him, he might be trying to play himself into his next contract.
Yeah.
And Blake knows the deal. Like, I'm going to go out there. I'm going to dive for the ball. I'm going to take charges. And we don't want our fifth center to be trying to get his, So I don't know. I would consider Dang, absolutely. But I think my preference would probably still be Blake.
Absolutely. Yeah. Not only because of the spicy every night dunk potential in garbage time, but
Yes.
just he's the captain of the vibes. He was the vibesman in the locker room all of last year. They were singing his praises off a mountain all year round throughout the locker room as far as just the value that he contributed off the court entirely. So of all these names, like for me, Blake Griffin is still my priority to bring him back just because he, we lost a lot of personalities in the offseason already, and Blake Griffin is fun to cheer for. Even just watching him on the bench and his reactions and how he's kind of galvanizing the team just by being there. I think that's a huge part of the heart and soul of the team, given that we shipped a lot of that out just a few weeks ago. So Blake Griffin, I will add another name to the pot. And Spoonie, I did see your tweet right before we went live, and that name is Austin Rivers, who the Celtics are reportedly looking into. He's likely available for the minimum. He's a 6'4" combo guard. He's got experience sitting on the Celtics bench once as a player and
as a
as a teenager in 2008. 35% from three last year. And here's an interesting tidbit, Spoonie. This is per Bobby Kravitsky of SI.com. Quote, "It's also worth noting that signing players with at least 3 years of NBA experience only counts slightly north of $2 million against a team's cap space. So even though Rivers has 11 years of NBA service time, meaning a veteran minimum contract for him would exceed $3 million, the Celtics' $3.4 million under the second apron per Spotrac could bring him on board without it being as tight of a squeeze to avoid crossing that threshold." In short, he's a little bit more affordable than other guys with his level of experience.
Yeah. So the raw numbers actually don't look too bad. Like 35% from three, 5, 1.5, 1.5 for how many minutes he was getting. Like that's not a disaster. And then I looked into some of the advanced stats. So the Timberwolves got 8 points worse per 100 possessions when Austin Rivers played. So they were like +2 with him off the court and like -5.5 with him on. His defensive Raptor, which is 538's advanced stat, is twice as bad as Mike Muscala's. And he's like a -5 in Raptor, which is like you should be in Europe playing basketball. Maybe not even Europe. Maybe like the Brazilian league. Yeah. And his LeBron is like -3.6. Like we just did not have we just have not had players who have graded out that poorly in advanced stats on this team playing any significant amount of minutes, which he wouldn't. But do we think Austin Rivers is at the point in his career? Probably is, where he would just accept never playing because he is not going to play like ever. So if he's down for that, he's had some throughout his career, there's always been kind of scuttlebutt about him maybe not being the greatest teammate. And speaking of wanting to get yours, like he tends to play that way as well. So I don't know, man. I'm not high on this one.
Big podcast guy, potential first to the floor collaboration midway through the season. Yeah, could get some of the other players on. We get more insights into their, like, these are the contributions you're looking for with the 15th man. I say in jest, clearly. Yeah, I mean,
maybe we could get his dad, huh? That would be a poll.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you pretty much hit the nail on the head there, Spoonie. Like the numbers don't look good. The Celtics were reportedly looking into him, so I thought it was
Yeah,
worth mentioning.
totally.
But maybe we should just move on to the next name you've got.
Sure. This one is he's a free agent. Would definitely be a minimum guy. Complete flyer. Basically didn't play last year because of injuries. Was a first round pick 4 years ago. Had some flashes when he was healthy. His second season on the Cavs. That's Dylan Windler, who he's, got some ball skills, 6'6" wing. He's still only 26 years old. He's shot it okay at times. Also shot it terribly at times. Not a great defensive player, but again, this fits into that kind of mold, like the Brissett style Banton mold, where it's like, okay, these guys have shown some ability to play in the NBA. They still have some room to grow. They've got good size. He's kind of a ball mover, decision maker type that can maybe knock down some open threes. Again, basically minimum flyer for a guy that maybe can give you some minutes here and there.
Mm-hmm. I honestly know nothing of this guy.
That's fair.
But I feel like probably the most potential upside of all the guys we've looked at, just as far as what he's available for, it's a free agent, available for the vet minimum. As far as impacts on our tax bill and things like that, it's extremely low risk.
Yes.
We don't have to worry about the personality factors of giving this guy no playing time. He can just be there if and when we need him. He does seem to feel like a Sam Hauser player archetype.
Definitely.
Which is not a bad thing to have an extra one of those on your bench, but this would be a guy where it's like break glass in case of emergency. We'll let you know if we need you. You might also enjoy some time up in Maine as well, because you're not going to enjoy a lot of time on the parquet floor there. So for what we need at this point, I kind of like this one the most.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. There's zero risk here. He would probably take a non-guaranteed deal like Champagny did. But Manista in the chat says, "What about Hamidou Diallo?" He's like the guard version of Georgie Dang for me. Like, I've always liked his game. Like, that dude can get to the rim. He's kind of like Jay Scrubb in that way, where it's like he doesn't have a lot of other skills, but just being able to get to the rim. He's explosive in transition as well. Not the greatest defensive player, but also like not a complete sieve on that end either. Like, he just can't shoot it. So I think he's like had trouble finding minutes wherever he's at because he's not good enough to be a primary ball handler. So like, what are you going to run pick and roll for him so he can get down the rim and try to finish over length? Like, that doesn't make a lot of sense, but he's really talented. Like, I think there's a good player in there. So I think he's like Windler that I would totally take a flyer on Diallo. I've always like really liked his game, and he kind of tore us up with the Pistons last year once or twice, as I recall.
Yeah, I'd be super into that. Again, great dimensions player, very athletic, can move his feet defensively. I don't know if he'd necessarily be accepting of that end of the bench role at this point in his career, just based on the playing time that he's seen for various teams recently. It doesn't seem like the kind of guy at the sort of juncture in his career where he's like looking to just like play for a championship yet. Like, he's still relatively young, right?
Oh yeah,
like in his mid to late 20s.
Yeah.
So if we could get him, and if he would be accepting of that role, I'd be stoked. He'd go shoot straight to the top of my list of preferred free agents. But I just don't know if we'd be a good landing spot from his perspective.
Right. He's 24. So yeah, he's really young, like compared to a lot of these guys. So I would be totally down with that. He might actually, that's a great suggestion. He might actually be the top of my wish list here amongst all the other than Najee and Kenrich Williams, but of these like real low end type of guys, he might be my number one, definitely over Windler.
Yeah. Good call. Let's take a quick break to shout out our sponsor, FanDuel. Baseball season is in full swing, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, because right now new customers get a no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's up to $1,000 back in bonus bets. If your first bet doesn't win, just go to FanDuel.com/Boston to join today. Spoonie, I did not tee you up to prepare a sample bet ahead of this podcast. My apologies. I was just, as you were talking there about Hamidou Diallo, looking at NBA betting odds. I know we're meant to discuss the MLB, but they do have the NBA regular season MVP for this upcoming season odds up on FanDuel. Jokic, obviously the top of the list there at plus 430. If you had to guess where Jason Tatum is ranked among his co-MVP peers, where would you put him?
Okay, I think you got to have Embiid's probably second as the reigning MVP. He's not. Okay. Steph?
Nope.
No, Giannis.
Yeah, you got it.
Okay, then Embiid,
Nope.
then Jason Tatum.
So Jokic, Giannis, Doncic at plus 650. We've got Embiid at plus 700, and then Tatum at the 5th spot plus 800. Not a terrible one to get on, given, I don't know, we saw some voter fatigue with Jokic. It might be a re-uprising for Giannis this year in terms of like him, refinding his way back to the top of the MVP pile there. And you would think like he's kind of out for a bit of a revengeful season, given the way that their season ended last year. But Tatum plus 800, like he's just coming into his physical prime and athletic prime now. Could be a good time to get on that. Obviously, gamble responsibly, but shout out to FanDuel.
Yeah, and also those Jokic odds, dude, plus money on Jokic, like plus 400 on Jokic right now. Like I might have to dip my toes
you could hedge
on
Jokic
that after this. Yeah, easily.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, I think without any further ado, we can get to the Schadenfreude report.
Schadenfreude.
The Sixers.
Schadenfreude.
The Lakers.
Schadenfreude.
The Heat.
Schadenfreude.
Milwaukee Bucks.
Schadenfreude.
Warriors.
Schadenfreude.
All right, it is time for the Schadenfreude report, where we take joy in the misery of other teams and their fan bases. Obviously, ruling out injuries. We do not celebrate injuries in any way, shape, or form, but we do love.
We celebrate this, though. We celebrate this.
Absolutely. Let's just run the clip and then we'll discuss it further.
Good break, but what can we look forward from Joel Embiid? I just want to win a championship. Whatever it takes. I don't know where that's going to be, whether it's in Philly or, everywhere else. I just want to have a chance to accomplish that. I want to see what it feels like to win that first one and then you can think about, the next one.
In Philly or, Spoonie, anywhere else?
Anywhere else.
How does this make you feel? Do you think it's the beginning of the end for the Sixers? What do you think comes next? Or is this nothing?
The third quarter of Game 7 was the beginning of the end for the Sixers. They gave up. Joel Embiid gave up. It's over, man. It's Jolver. I don't know. That was bad. But like he did not have to bring up Philadelphia or anywhere else. Like he could have just been like, I really want to win a championship. But it's like, that nugget, it's in his brain, it's in his soul of like, I need to get the hell out of here, which is like every time I visit Philly, I feel that too. So I get it. He just had to vocalize how he was feeling because he couldn't help himself. He couldn't hold back anymore. And Harden's like maybe on the way out, and for all his faults, like he won them 2 of those 3 games basically single-handedly. So if I was a Sixers fan, like I might be done with this guy too. I don't know, man. Like, yeah, he's a reigning MVP, but he choked hardcore in the playoffs again. And he's obviously can't be trusted to be healthy by the time the playoffs come around. And you can get an absolute insane package for him. So I don't know, man. Like I would be on some thin ice if I was a Sixers fan. I'll say that.
I think I read a stat the other day that said that Joel Embiid is the only MVP ever to never get out of the second round, which I think I'm recalling correctly, which is insane. And on his comments here, like these guys, especially at this level of NBA stardom, are so media trained. Like they just spend so much time in media training and ensuring that they're pulling their words back such to never get in hot water like this. And despite all that, for Joel Embiid to get himself in this position using his words, I think that's somewhat telling. And add in all the history that you just mentioned, Spoonie, like they've just fallen out in the second round so many times. He's choked so many times, often at the hands of Boston. Wouldn't you want to get as far away from Boston, like just completely jump conferences at this point if you're Embiid? And then typically with MVPs of recent history, so Giannis and even Jokic to some degree, and Kevin Durant, certainly Steph Curry, they attract players to them, to join them, to fight for a championship with them. And I don't necessarily think that Embiid has that same pulling power. And certainly now when like they've got several players jumping ship or looking to jump ship in Harden's case, he doesn't seem like a typical MVP. And to that I ask, like, if he did shake loose from the tree and he did become available, and the Celtics certainly have assets, would you even want to trade for or entertain a trade for Embiid at this point?
This is like, I don't think there's any way it would make sense for both teams to make that trade happen. I'm dodging the question. But if you're asking me in a vacuum, assuming we can do it, we'll say like they'll take Porzingis back or something like that, right? Because it probably doesn't make sense to have them both. Yeah, I would probably do it, right? I mean, he still is the MVP, and like, like I really dislike him. But that team, the Jays and Embiid, would be pretty damn stacked, man. Like that would be pretty damn stacked.
I think you'd have to give up Jaylen Brown in a potential Embiid trade. I just don't like his vibe, man. Like I know there's not a lot of analysis there, but everything that we just talked about as far as like why he hasn't seen real success outside of the individual award with the MVP, I think that's very telling. And he's just about to hit 30. He's already had a riddled injury history. Like maybe he's peaked. Maybe he's crested as far as like, where he's going to get to in the NBA, at least with the Sixers, and having to give up a significant amount of, draft capital and pieces for him to acquire him. I just don't see that actually making the Celtics better. I have to add the caveat there that I truly hate the Sixers with all of my being. And that's obviously going to color my opinion of anyone who plays for them, notably Joel Embiid. I have really come to love the Ricky, though, the Rights to Ricky Sanchez podcast. And I got to really listening to them throughout the most recent Celtics Sixers series. And, I like to think that I'm an empathetic person, a sympathetic person. And at times listening to them, I do feel their pain. But even then, like, kind of fuck the Sixers, right? I just don't want anything to do with really any of their guys at all. So I would not entertain an Embiid trade, but I would entertain the idea of him moving to the West and just knocking off another one of our closest rivals and making the road to the championship easier for the Celtics. But it is fun to see the Sixers in a bit of a pity hole here.
Except D'Anthony Melton. You can come over anytime, buddy. You're welcome to join whenever you want. But he'll knock somebody off in the first round who might be a good team, and then he'll lose in the second round out west. So go for it, dude. Go to the Clippers. Join the hospital over there, man. Yeah. See y'all in nice suits on the sidelines.
Now we're gonna wrap with some miscellaneous news, and all of this is, I guess, very miscellaneous, again, given the juncture of the offseason that we're at. But there was an article from Lauren Campbell of MassLive.com that came out overnight Aussie time, and that is that Joe Mazzulla's job as coach of the Celtics was never in trouble, according to this report. I think at the time, we all definitely thought that he was in trouble. He probably felt like he was in trouble as well. Some of us wanted him to be in trouble from a job security standpoint. But now looking back as the dust has settled, it seems like his job security was never at risk. What's your reaction to this article, Spoonie? I think as a fan base, we seem to all have sort of collectively forgiven Joe Mazzulla at this point. So just curious to get your take on this one.
I don't believe it. Straight up. Like, I just don't think you can bring Joe back if we get swept by the Heat. I mean, like, how can you possibly go from making the finals to getting swept by an undermanned Heat team and, with your first year coach who's taking tons of criticism? Like, I don't think it would have been tenable with the fan base to bring him back. Like, it would have been putting Joe in a bad spot to bring him back because it would have been so toxic if he stuck around, if we got swept. So I think coming back and losing in 7 saved his job. It's easy to have this report come out now because you didn't have to actually make that decision. Like, oh yeah, we would have stood firm and we would have kept them. But I frankly don't believe that.
Mm-hmm. And now, like going further than that, like Grant Williams, Joe Mazzulla reportedly didn't always get along, at least from a basketball X's and O's perspective. Grant Williams, gone. Marcus Smart, Joe Mazzulla, same thing. Allegedly, Marcus Smart, gone. Not only is Joe Mazzulla safe, but they're like fully like walking in his direction and loading up on his basketball philosophy and approach to the game as well. So it better fucking work.
Yeah.
Because we love those guys. But certainly there's a lot of faith in Joe Mazzulla and what he can do for the team. So
I wrote about that for Celtics blog. It hasn't come out yet. It's kind of a rambling mess. But we'll see. It might get edited down quite a bit, but we'll see. But essentially, I wrote about how we're effectively leaving our switch everything defense that got us to the finals by the wayside. We're abandoning it, and we're going to try to be kind of like Denver, slightly worse offensively, probably a bit better defensively. And we will see. Yeah, because you're right, Ben. It better fucking work, dude.
Yes. Otherwise, we're all screwed. We're going to pack it up. We're going to end the podcast, and we're going to find something else to do with our spare time. All right, moving on. So there is a third two-way spot that needs to be filled, Spoonie. And obviously, Jay Scrubb just caught the second one. We've got JD Davison who locked up the first one. Is there anyone that comes to mind? Have you got a name on the tip of your tongue for who might pick up this third two-way spot for the Celtics?
Okay. Why did it take the fifth game for Vincent Valerio Bodon to play? Did you see that dude when he came into Summer League?
Electric.
He lit it up. He looked awesome. Like he's a quick ball mover. He's like burying threes with a hand in his face. Like he's got a beautiful jump shot. I'm like, whoa, who is this guy? Like, and defensively, he was going to be a work in progress. He looked pretty rough on that end, but also it's Summer League. Who knows? But like, give it to that dude. I mean, damn, like that guy impressed me like crazy in like 25 minutes. But if we're looking for someone a little more established in the NBA game, I would go with Jared Butler. This will be his third year. So I think his last year he can get a two-way spot. He's a guard out of Baylor, 6'3", short wingspan. It's kind of why he fell. Some injury concerns. But he he tore it up in his first summer league, actually. And then he's just kind of bounced around. He was last on Oklahoma City. He just can't really stick anywhere, but a lot of people I respect really liked him a lot coming out of the draft. He's like kind of a combo guard, can really handle the ball, not a great playmaker, but can shoot it, can kind of create his own shot a little bit. So he's a guy I'd take a flyer on with that third two-way spot because I just think he's got talent. You know what I mean? Maybe he lacks a little bit physically, but there could be something there.
Yeah, both good options and probably better than this one. But Jason Tatum campaigned for the two-way eligibility for this player, and that's Harry Giles.
Yeah.
Why not just appease the man in Jason Tatum by bringing in more of his friends at this point? What's the argument against that?
I mean, I actually, before Harry Giles got hurt like 4 more times, I actually really liked him as a prospect. And look, if the argument is like, bring him in, make Jason Tatum happy, that's probably got more upside than bringing in Jared Butler, who will probably never see the NBA court for the Celtics. So I'm fine with that. But like, you can use these two-way spots to develop talent, like Danny Ainge wasted them with Tremont Waters and Taco, who are basically like, the circus act up in Maine. See the shortest guy in the NBA and the tallest guy, but they were never the odds of those two becoming NBA players were like 0. And it seems like Brad is really targeting, like, I want wings. I want guys who have a clear defined role in the NBA that can be role players like Champagnie. He's not great, but he's a big wing that can shoot the ball. So it makes sense. Hauser, same thing, big wing that can shoot the ball. So Giles, it's a shame because he really was an absurd athlete and had flashed some passing skills when he was on the Kings. But dude, he's just, it's over for him, man, unfortunately. But if it makes Tatum happy.
Yeah. Can you bring in too many mates of one guy, though? Like, we've got Emil Jefferson. Nick Sang is the trainer who's like good mates with Jason Tatum. If you bring in Gilesy as well, Harry Giles, you may be loading up too much on his good mates. Do you maybe want to diversify the friends that you bring in for our players? And poor old JB there, who's like already, most of the time when he makes headlines, it's like he doesn't get along with Jason Tatum. And also, we're not hiring any of his friends. We're hiring
he hates Boston. Yeah.
All right, let's move on. So Grant Williams in an article by Adam Himmelsbach of the Globe. So, quote, I had a 2-week span of being unprofessional, which I look back on and I'm disappointed in myself with, is the quote from Grant Williams in that article there. Do you think that's in reference to anything in particular that we saw as fans watching from home?
Yeah, maybe the Cleveland stuff with the I'm gonna make both. I think that was pretty stupid and unprofessional. And I think I saw a report a week or so ago, like Joe came up to him and was like, "You need to make this about the team, not about yourself." So if I had to guess, I would say, and that's like right around when he was falling out of the rotation too. So I think it's probably then. I don't know. Do you have another like spot you can point to, Ben?
Not really. And I listened to a few, podcasts and read a lot of comments on this as well, just trying to get a little bit more insight. And it seems the general consensus is probably throughout the course of the season. I know he mentions 2 weeks here of just being at odds with Joe Mazzulla and his approach to the game, and maybe not conducting himself in the way that he was being coached to out on the court. And not a 2-week stretch that I can point to, but I mean, certainly times where it seemed like the way that he was playing was not in alignment with how the rest of the team was playing. I can't isolate 2 weeks there, but it seemed like a trend throughout the season. And I think by the end, they just had enough.
Yeah, there was one game where he came in garbage time and he took like 6 straight threes. And like that was right around that. He was banging. I think it went like 4 for 6 or 3 for 5 or something like that in like 3 minutes. So and that was right around that time too. Yeah, it was right around that Jazz game too, I think, Michael Spitzer. So yeah, it's got to be that sort of second. Once his shooting cooled off, I think he seemed to just get frustrated and yeah, he's gone, man. It's a shame. I liked Grant, but we got to move on. We'll get O'Shai Brissett, step up, buddy. It's your turn now.
Yep. Next play mentality, as Brad Stevens would say. All right, final bit of news here. So Doc Rivers and Doris Burke are joining the ESPN broadcasting dream team along with Mike Breen. First of all, like we know Doris, we're familiar with Doris. I like Doris Burke. She has a lot of detractors out there, which I don't fully understand. Like I think she's relatively partial and unbiased, and I enjoy her analysis of the game, and you can tell how much she loves the game. It's why I really like Mike Breen as well. Just their passion for the game really shines through in their work. Doc Rivers used to be on the call back in the day before his Orlando days. The voice has degraded somewhat. It's a little bit more coarse than it was when he was a younger man. But again, he's another guy whose passion for the game really shines through, and I think he's really animated and really fun on the call. Really scraping the bottom of the barrel here, Spooty. But what are your thoughts on this change to the broadcasting squad?
Yeah, I mean, Bill Simmons always talks about how amazing Doc Rivers was as like a play-by-play guy or as a color commentary guy. And I mean, I frankly just don't remember that. But I tend to agree with his takes on who's good and who's bad. He's a JVG guy, which is, I think he's very divisive. And I love Jeff Van Gundy. I love both the Van Gundys. So, yeah, I mean, I'm interested to see it. Like, it is cool when guys come straight out of the league and then get and sitting in the booth, because you do tend to get better insight because they're so up on the game. Shaq doesn't know anything about the modern NBA, right? Like he hasn't played in so long, and he's not like looking at tape and stuff. Like Doc will teach you stuff when he's calling a game, if you can hear him over your bass blowing out in your TV speakers. So I think it'll be interesting.
R.I.P. the sound guy who has to EQ Doc's voice into like an auditory sensible frequency. Who from the NBA media would you most like to have a beer with? This could be local Celtics media. This could be national. Could be anyone.
I think this is probably the easiest question. The Van Gundys are probably 2 and 3 for me, but number 1 is Barkley. It's gotta be Barkley, dude. Like Barkley would be so fun to have a beer with and just shoot the shit with, right?
I hadn't thought of that. That would be pretty good, actually. Charles Barkley. Mike Breen's always been at the top of my list just because he seems like such a cool, genuine guy. Like when he was doing the game after Kobe Bryant passed away and he was in tears. Like, obviously that's not a moment to celebrate, but just this guy just brings all of himself to his job, and he just seems like such a genuine guy. And I think he'd probably have a lot of cool stories from his time in the NBA as well. I wanted to say Marv Albert, but like clearly not a clean cut character. But just the idea of like, hey Marv, would you like another beer? Yes, and pretzels, just that kind of
That's
thing. I think
good,
would be
Ben.
fun.
That's
you.
good. We might have to make you do a pod in your Marv Albert voice. Yeah.
If I lose a bet, sure. And then just Mike Gorman. Mike
Yeah.
Gorman, I think, would be an ultimate beer hang as well. So call in if you're listening. Let us know your thoughts on who you'd love
The
to have a
lines are
beer with.
open.
Yeah, that's right.
Tommy would have been, if Tommy were still around, he'd probably be number one though, with a bullet
Totally.
pretty easily. So Mark Jackson is last.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I would only have a beer with him if I could somehow spend time encouraging him to resign. That's all.
Yeah.
I'll take one for the team and spend a bit of time with the guy. All right. Finally here. So I'm a little concerned. Maybe concerned is the wrong word. Wary that the fan opinion on Jaylen Brown is really divided right now. And obviously that swings so much in the direction of like his last game or last series that we've seen him play in a Celtics uniform. But he did make the second All-NBA team just this past season, Spoonie, and is rightfully eligible for a Supermax extension. Assuming that Jaylen Brown is seeing some of this dialogue online, what would you say to Jaylen Brown right now if you had an open line to JB?
Like, Jaylen, baby, it's your boy Spoonie.
Click, hangs up.
Click. Yeah. No, I'd probably say like part of the problem is that we did not meet expectations this past year, right? Like Boston is not a town where that can fly at all. So if you go out there and you win a ring, all this will go away for the rest of your career, or at least for a year or two. So go out there, win a championship, play your game, do what you did last year, but keep it going in the playoffs, and all the noise will disappear and you will become one of the most loved people in Boston history. I guarantee. No, in Boston sports history. I guarantee that if you bring a championship home. So yeah, that's probably where I'd go. Just like win, man. That will solve everything.
I can't top that. I would just reiterate the general love for him among Celtics fans, and that haters are always louder than lovers, for lack of a better word. And like, if I go to a restaurant and it's good, I won't leave a review because my expectation is that it's good. I'll only leave bad reviews for restaurants that like significantly fell short of my expectations, and I want to let the people know, like, avoid this place. So the people who are detracting for Jaylen Brown are going to be much louder than those who are just used to loving him and haven't changed their stance on him as well. So I would argue that there's a bigger cohort of people who are pro Jaylen Brown than those who are vocally against him. So we love you, Jaylen. We're looking forward to you coming back next season. Let's wrap it up there. I think that's going to do it for this one. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thanks to everyone who joined us in the live stream here. It's always a lot of fun seeing your comments pop up and reacting to them during the stream. Don't forget to join us here live on Thursday night, 8 p.m. for our interview with John Corrales. Spoonie, love your work, mate. Until next time, go Celtics.